your decision point. You do not fix that by trying harder. You fix it by noticing what kind of love is being offered in the first place. My name is Darius Wynn, and the night my wife compared me to her ex for the last time, rain was tapping against the kitchen window over our sink in a thin, steady rhythm. It was late October Milwaukee, the kind of cold that turned the glass black by 5:30. I had just finished frying catfish, and the whole apartment still smelled like cornmeal and grease and lemon pepper. Our daughter was at my mother's place for weekend, and the place felt too quiet for what was coming. My wife, Nia, sat at the counter in one of my old college sweatshirts, swirling Pinot Noir like she was judging it. We had been married 4 years, together 6, and if you met us from the outside, you would have called us solid. I worked for the city water department, managing compliance paperwork and field schedules. Steady work, union benefits, early mornings. Nia was a patient access coordinator at a private orthopedic clinic downtown, all polished nails and neat blims and color-coded lunch containers. She liked structure in ways that looked impressive until you live inside them. She folded towels so sharply they looked store-bought. She corrected people's grammar under her breath. She believed being disappointed made her smarter than everyone else. If you've ever been in a relationship where you felt quietly compared, judged, or made to feel like you were never enough, stay with this story. What starts as subtle disrespect can turn into something far deeper, like this video. Share it with somebody who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more powerful relationship drama stories with real emotional lessons. I was not flashy, never had been. I cut my own grass, shined my own church shoes, kept a winter emergency kit in the trunk before the first real snow. My one indulgence was records. Old soul, jazz, a little gospel. On Saturday mornings, I would put on Curtis Mayfield, clean the apartment room by room, and open the windows even when the air was cold. Nia used to say that was one of the things she loved about me, that I made ordinary life feel steady. Somewhere along the way, steady stopped sounding good to her. It started sounding small. The first time she brought up her ex-husband, it did not even register as a threat. His name was Marcel. They had been married young, divorced before she met me, and had no children. She mentioned him the way people mention old apartments or former jobs. Casual, detached. Marcel liked nicer restaurants. Marcel knew wine. Marcel wore tailored coats. I let it roll off because I figured everybody has a past, and I was too grown to feel rattled by a man who was not in the room. What I did not understand yet was that he was always in the room for her. It started showing up in little places. I would put on a dark green sweater for dinner, and she would smooth the sleeve, then say, Marcel always understood layers. He could make winter clothes look expensive. She would catch my face and add, but you have your own thing. At first, I accepted those last 6 words like a bandage. Then I started hearing the insult more clearly than the recovery. She had a habit of delivering disrespect in a careful tone, like wrapping broken glass in tissue paper somehow changed what it was. I made excuses because I wanted the marriage to work. That is one thing pride keeps people from admitting. Sometimes you do not stay because you are weak. Sometimes you stay because you made vows in front of your grandmother, your pastor, and everybody from both sides of the family. And you want those words to mean something. My father left when I was 12, and I had spent half my life promising myself I would not be another man who walked out when things got complicated. That promise helped shape me. It also trapped me longer than it should have. There were still good parts then. We had a Sunday ritual at a diner on the south side where the waitress knew Nia wanted extra lemon in her water and knew I always ordered turkey sausage even though I wanted pork. We took our daughter, Alani, to the lakefront and let her throw stale bread to gulls she was half afraid of. We hosted Christmas Eve with my cousins crowded in folding chairs and aluminum pans everywhere. In those moments, Nia laughed easily. She braided Alani's hair with patient hands. She looked like the woman I kept trying to save. But comparison has a way of soaking through the seams. It was not just clothes or money. It was posture, timing, taste. Marcel tipped better. Marcel knew what to say to hosts at nice places. Marcel never had to check his account before booking a hotel. Marcel bought flowers without occasion. Once, in the checkout line at a corner store while an old radio played the OJs too loud near the lottery machine, Nia looked at my basket and said, Marcel never bought generic coffee. Then she smiled and asked if I wanted gum. The thing about comments like that is they do not always cause one big fight. Sometimes they do something more dangerous. They make you edit yourself quietly. I started dressing a little differently. Not because I wanted to, but because I was tired of hearing what I was not. I bought one camel overcoat I could not really justify. I switched to cologne. I Googled restaurants I had never cared about before. I hated myself for that. Hated that I was moving around inside my own marriage like a substitute teacher, trying to impress a classroom that already decided not to respect him. The first decision I made that could have gone differently happened in February, after my cousin Rochelle's baby shower. We were driving home through slush, windshield wipers squeaking, and Nia said Marcel would have brought a better gift. She said it almost lazily, staring out at the snowbanked sidewalks. I pulled over near a row of duplexes under a flickering streetlight and asked her very calmly whether she realized how often she compared me to him. She folded her arms and said, "I am just talking." I almost dropped it. Instead, I told her talking like that was disrespectful. She cried that night, not because she thought I was right, because she said I was being harsh and making her feel policed in her own marriage. She said she could never be honest with me if every observation turned into a problem. I ended up apologizing for my tone, which still embarrasses me to admit. She did not apologize for the content. That should have taught me something. But at that point, I was still more committed to peace than to clarity. Too many people confuse those two. I definitely did. Spring came late that year. Milwaukee was still gray in April. The buses hissing to curb. Gutters full of dirty ice. Church ladies still wearing wool. Around then, Nia got closer to a new co-worker named Saad, a woman who dressed like every hallway was a runway and always seemed to have a rooftop brunch recommendation. Saad fed Nia's dissatisfaction, the way some friends do when they mistake appetite for ambition. After lunch with her, Nia came home sharper, more restless. She started talking about levels, the way people talk when they are trying to shame ordinary life. By summer, the comparisons had stopped sounding accidental altogether. They were targeted. We went to a neighborhood block party where somebody had a speaker blasting Frankie Beverly. Little kids running through a burst hydrant, men arguing over spades under a pop-up tent. I had on clean white sneakers, dark jeans, a short-sleeve button-up. Nia leaned in and said, "You look fine." Marcel just always looked finished. That word stayed with me. Finished, like I was a draft, like I was the version you settle for before your real preference arrives. Our daughter picked up on the tension before either of us admitted it. Alani was 7, old enough to notice silence, still young enough to ask about it directly. One Tuesday, while I was helping her build a school project volcano out of cardboard and newspaper strips, she looked between us and said, "Why does Mommy sound mad when she says normal stuff?" Nia laughed it off. I did too, but later, sitting on the edge of Alani's bed while the humidifier hummed, I felt a kind of shame I still struggle to describe. Children should not have to decode grown people. The second decision that could have gone differently came in August, when I saw Marcel's name light up on Nia's phone. We were at my mother's house for Sunday dinner. My uncles were arguing about the lions in the living room. Somebody was slicing pound cake in the kitchen, and Nia had left her phone on the arm of the couch when it buzzed. Just a name. Nothing else. My stomach tightened. I could have picked it up. Could have searched for answers right there. Instead, I walked away because I wanted to be the kind of husband who did not snoop. That night, I asked her directly whether she still talked to him. She sighed like I was wasting oxygen and said sometimes yes, but only about practical things from their old shared tax filing and one lingering insurance issue. She even showed me 2 messages that look harmless. Short, dry, boring. I let myself feel relieved, which now feels almost naive. Relief is cheap when you are handed only the part of the truth designed to calm you down. Still, I chose to believe her because the alternative would have forced a larger decision. And I was not ready. The real shift came after Nia got promoted at the clinic and started staying later. Her hours stretched strangely. Some nights she came home keyed up, talking fast, criticizing everything from the lamp in the den to the pace of my career. Other nights she came home soft and distracted, like her mind had not made the trip back with her. She started dressing with more intention on random weekdays. New earrings, heels, and whether that did not call for heels. A deep plum lipstick she only used to wear on anniversaries or New Year's Eve. Then came the sentence that split the whole thing open. It was that rainy October night, catfish cooling on plates, kitchen light too yellow. She took a sip of wine and looked at me with that half-amused expression she used when she thought she was about to teach me something. "I am going to be honest," she said. "Marcel dressed better than you, made more money than you, and honestly treated me better too." She said it like a summary, like the matter had been researched. My fork stopped halfway in my mouth. I set it down carefully. I did not raise my voice. That surprised even me. I asked one question. "Then how did that marriage end?" She blinked, then shrugged. He left. I asked why. She gave a little laugh, almost offended on her own behalf. Because he was insecure. He said if I thought so highly of other options, he would not stand in my way. She rolled her eyes like his words were childish. Then she added, "He never came back either. That was the part that irritated me. He acted like I did not matter." That was the moment the room changed shape. I asked her whether she had ever apologized to him. She frowned. For what? Not sarcastic, not defensive. She truly did not see it. The rain kept tapping the glass. A siren passed somewhere far off, blurred by weather. And in that plain, ordinary kitchen, something inside me settled. Not exploded. Settled. I realized I was listening to a woman describe the same pattern she was repeating with me and still cast herself as the injured party. It was like hearing somebody explain exactly where they buried the last relationship, shovel still in hand. I stood up and carried my plate to the sink. She watched me, waiting for either pleading or anger. Those were the two responses she understood. Instead, I rinsed the dish and said, "That makes sense." She stared. "What makes sense?" she asked. I turned around and told her, "If you talk to him like you talk to me, I understand why he left." Her face changed fast. Confusion first, then heat. She said I was taking a stranger's side over my wife's. I told her I was taking my own side for once. Then I walked out to the balcony. I stood outside in socks and let the cold come to the concrete. From the alley below, I could hear bottles clinking in a recycling bin and a bus groaning as it turned the corner. My phone buzzed in my pocket twice. I did not check it. I thought about my vows. I thought about Alani asleep at my mother's, her small pink backpack by the door over there. I thought about how many times I had mistaken endurance for love. That was the longest 15 minutes of my marriage, because by the time I stepped back inside, I knew I was done. Nia had moved to the couch, arms folded, jaw set. She said I was dramatic, said I could not handle honesty, said grown women with standards always scare men who know they are lacking. I listened without interrupting, because I wanted to hear exactly how she framed me when she felt her control slipping. Every sentence made the decision cleaner. When she paused, I told her I was sleeping in the den. She gave this short, disbelieving laugh and said, "Over that." I said, "No, over all of it." Then I took a blanket and shut the door. I did not end the marriage that night, because I needed one more thing for myself. I needed to know whether I was leaving in reaction or in truth. The next morning I got up early, made coffee, packed Alani's lunch for Monday, even though it was still Sunday, and wrote down every moment I could remember when Nia had used Marcel as a weapon. The list ran longer than I expected. That did something to me. Seeing disrespect in one memory is easy to rationalize. Seeing in a column, over years, strips away every excuse you've been feeding yourself. Later that afternoon, Nia behaved like nothing had happened. She asked whether we still planned to take Alani to the pumpkin patch next weekend. She sent me a link to some expensive boots and said I should consider something more refined for winter. She never once mentioned what she said at dinner. That told me more than any apology would have. She had already filed a hurt into a category called my sensitivity. By evening, after I picked up Alani from my mother's and watched her fall asleep in the back seat with candy corn dust on her coat, I knew I could not keep this house standing for appearances. The end came on a Wednesday, after I got off work early, because a field inspection was postponed. I came home first and found the apartment empty. Fine. Then I noticed Nia's old cedar keepsake box open on the dresser in our bedroom. She usually kept cards and receipts there. On top was a folded restaurant bill from a steakhouse downtown. I knew we had not been together. 2 entrees, 2 cocktails, a date from the previous Friday, the night she told me the clinic had kept her late for system updates. My chest went cold before my mind caught up. I should say this carefully. I did not find confession. I did not find lipstick on a collar or some dramatic proof people can wave around. What I found was enough for truth, not spectacle. Under the receipt sat a valet stub and a note in Marcel's handwriting on hotel stationery. Just 3 lines. You looked happier than you admit. Proud of you always. Call me when you're ready to stop performing. No hearts. No declarations. Which almost made it worse. Intimacy does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it shows up in familiarity, in history picking up exactly where it left off. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time holding that note. The comfort beneath me was the one my aunt had sewn as our wedding gift, navy and cream, tiny hand-stitched squares. I remember staring at the stitching because it gave my eyes somewhere to go besides reality in my hands. This was the 3rd decision point. I could have waited for a full confession, could have called Marcel, could have staged a dramatic confrontation. Instead, I chose restraint because I had finally learned that more evidence does not always bring more peace. Sometimes it just drags you deeper into humiliation. When Nia got home, she knew immediately. Maybe it was my face. Maybe the keepsake box on the dresser gave it away. She stopped in the doorway with her work tote still over her shoulder. "What is this?" she asked, which was such a ridiculous question that I almost laughed. I held up the note. She closed her eyes for 1 second, then opened them, already irritated. Not ashamed, irritated. "You went through my things?" she asked. I said, "You had dinner with Marcel and lied about it." She dropped her bag and said, "It was dinner. We were talking." "Talking about what?" I asked. She hesitated, then said, "About my life, about feeling stuck, about whether I made a mistake." She said that part quietly, almost like she wanted credit for honesty now that the door had blown open. I asked whether anything physical happened. She said no, then added, "But I wanted to feel seen." I believed both statements and still felt something in me tear. People think betrayal is only about bodies. It is not. Sometimes betrayal is what your partner builds emotionally in the space where your trust was supposed to live. I told her I was done. No big speech. No shouting. Just done. She stared at me with the exact same expression she had described Marcel wearing years earlier in her story about their divorce, and I saw recognition dawn in real time. "You are serious," she said. "Yes," I answered. "You are really doing this over dinner?" I looked at her and said, "Not over dinner, over contempt, over lying, over making me compete with a man you were still feeding from." Her face hardened. "So what? You're going to leave exactly like he did?" I said, "I am going to leave because you gave me the same reason." The panic came in waves. First disbelief, then strategy. She cried, said counseling had fixed this, said every marriage hits ugly seasons, said she had not actually cheated in the way that counts. Then anger arrived. She called me cold, said I had always wanted an excuse to escape real intimacy, said my nice guy routine was just cowardice in a sweater. I let her talk. There's a point where arguing only helps the person who harmed. You feel less alone in their mess. I had no interest in helping her redistribute what belonged to her. We did not separate overnight, because real life rarely grants that kind of clean break. There was a child involved, a lease, bills, schedules. My mother let me and Alani stay with her for a few weeks in a brick bungalow near Sherman Park, where the radiators knocked all night, and the hallways smelled faintly of blue magic and bleach. I slept in my old room under a framed high school track photo. Every morning my mother made oatmeal with too much cinnamon and did not press me for details. That mercy probably saved me from saying something bitter in front of my daughter. Nia started texting like somebody trying 5 different keys in a lock. Some messages were soft. "I miss our family." Some were manipulative. "Alani should not suffer because you are stubborn." Some were revisionist. You know we were both disconnected. I kept my responses practical and brief. Pickup times, school forms, pediatrician appointment reminders. Nothing more. She hated that. She wanted emotional engagement, even if it was anger. Silence with logistics feels like a verdict when somebody is used to turning every conflict into a debate. They can still win. She called me cruel for becoming calm. Over the next 2 months, the consequences started arriving for her the way real consequences do, through ordinary systems. Her mother, Miss Celeste, stopped taking her side once she learned the full story. That woman loved her daughter fiercely, but she loved truth more than performance. One Sunday after church, she pulled me aside near the fellowship hall, while kids ran around with paper cups of red punch, and told me, I raised her better than comparison and confusion. She looked tired when she said it. That mattered to me. Somebody else finally named what I had been carrying. Then her job situation shifted. Not because of the scandal. Nothing cinematic. Just fallout from distraction. Nia had always been precise, but now she was missing small details, arriving late, forgetting callbacks. The clinic put her on a performance plan. Saad, the glamorous co-worker who had fueled so much of her restlessness, transferred to a hospital system in Illinois and basically vanished. Suddenly Nia was left alone with the life she had spent months criticizing. That is one version of karma people overlook. Not lightning, not a disaster. Just a gradual removal of the noise that kept you from hearing yourself clearly. Around Christmas, Marcel dropped out of the story too. I know that because Nia told me during exchange in the parking lot of Alani's dance recital. Snow was falling in those big, slow flakes that made everything quiet for a minute. Parents were carrying garment bags and coffee. Children wobbling around in tights and tiny boots. Nia stood beside her SUV and said, without looking at me, "He is engaged." I nodded. She laughed once, but it sounded broken. He said reconnecting was a mistake. He said I only reach backward when I am unhappy with what I built. Then she wiped her nose and stared at the slush. I did not feel triumphant hearing that, just tired. There is a version of me from years earlier who might have felt vindicated, might have secretly enjoyed the symmetry of it, but by then the whole situation felt bigger and sadder than winning. I had watched someone chase validation so recklessly that she blew holes in 2 chapters of her own life and still stood there trying to call it honesty. So I simply told her I was sorry she was hurting, but that it did not change where we stood. She nodded like she already knew. The divorce process took 7 months. Paperwork, mediation, schedules, child support calculations, the kind of bureaucracy that makes heartbreak feel fluorescent. We sat in offices with fake ficus plants and listened to professionals explain our family in terms of assets and custody percentages. Through all of it, Nia kept looking for ways to turn the emotional temperature back up. She would mention old vacations, bring up private jokes, comment on my coat like we were still in some intimate argument. I stayed polite and distant, not because I wanted to punish her, because every warm open became a place she tried to crawl back through. One evening after mediation, I took Alani to a barbershop fundraiser where they were giving free haircuts and school supplies before winter break. The place smelled like talc, Clippers aftershave, and somebody's fried fish from next door. Men were laughing too loud at the TV. A little boy in a booster seat kept crying every time the cape touched his neck. Watching all that ordinary life keep moving helped me breathe again. I realized healing was not some grand breakthrough. It was standing in a crowded room, hearing Marvin Gaye under the buzz of Clippers, and noticing my chest no longer tighten when my phone lit up. I started therapy in January, mainly because I did not want Alani inheriting my silence as normal. My therapist, a black woman in her 50s with silver locks and exact questions, told me something I wrote down after our 3rd session. Contempt is not a communication problem. It is a value problem. That sentence straightened my spine. I had spent so much energy trying to respond better, explain better, endure better. But you cannot skillfully communicate your way out of somebody enjoying the power of belittling you. Once I accepted that, a lot of self-blame fell off me like wet wool. Nia's unraveling became most visible not in private, but in how other people started responding to her. Friends quit rushing to soothe her. Her brother told her flat out that keeping Marcel in our marriage was reckless and disrespectful. Even Saad, from what I heard through a mutual friend, told her she needed to stop romanticizing men who kept leaving the minute she started measuring them. The narrative she had lived on, that men just could not handle her standards, began collapsing from all sides. 2 different husbands, same clean exit. That kind of pattern is hard to accessorize into innocence. The strangest part was how quiet my own life became once I stopped proving myself to a ghost. I rented a smaller duplex in Wauwatosa with a narrow porch and a maple tree out front. On weekend, Alani and I made pancakes shaped like lopsided animals. I brought my records over 1 milk crate at a time, then finally bought a proper shelf. I started, wearing what I actually liked again, dark denim, work jackets, plain sweaters, boots built for weather instead of approval. Steady came back to me as a compliment. Peace stopped feeling like something I had to apologize for choosing. About a year after the split, Nia called for something unrelated to custody. Her voice sounded older, stripped down. She said she had been thinking about that night in the kitchen and wanted to say something she should have said long ago. I used a comparison like a blade, she told me. I kept calling it honesty because I did not want to admit I was cruel. I believed she meant it. Growth sounded awkward on her, but real. I thanked her. Then we talked about Alani's spring recital and ended the call. Closure, when it finally came, was much smaller than the damage. Looking back, the line that changed my life was not that Marcel dressed better or made more money. It was that Nia believed those things entitled her to treat a husband like an audition. Once I understood that, the ending became simple. I did not leave to teach her some lesson. I left because they would have trained my daughter to think love means enduring constant disrespect, as long as it comes dressed in honesty. The karma was never me getting revenge. The karma was a pattern repeating until she finally had to hear herself. And by then, I was already gone. When I think about this story now, I do not think about the restaurant receipt first. I think about the pumpkin patch plan she made like nothing had happened, and the parking lot where she admitted Marcel had moved on to. Those were the real lessons. Disrespect usually grows in ordinary moments, and consequences usually arrive the same way. Pay attention to patterns, not just apologies. A person who keeps using comparison to control you is telling you what kind of future they believe you should accept. If this story hits you hard, let it remind you of one thing. Love should never feel like a competition with somebody from the past. If you want more original first-person cheating karma, marriage drama, and relationship stories with real consequences, like this video, share it, and subscribe so you do not miss the next one. The end.